Hi, I'm Camille. I'm 32 years old, living in San Jose, and apparently, according to my family, I'm the designated accountant for everyone's dreams. I've worked in IT infrastructure for nearly a decade, managing six-figure systems and seven-figure stress. But somehow, every family update still lands on my lap with a price tag attached. The latest? A vacation to Maui. They offered my brother Brandon a free tropical getaway. They handed me the invoice. At first, it was subtle. Just vague language about sharing costs and coordinating bookings. Then came the full $15,472 charge on my card. Flights, suites, luau's, all booked under my name without my permission. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't invited. I was leveraged. If you've ever been told to help out because you're doing well or had your boundaries bulldozed in the name of family, stick around. Because what started as a stolen vacation, it ended with subpoenas, a trust fund, and a name I took back in court. Drop a comment if this hits home. And don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you've ever paid the price for someone else's entitlement. They offered him a free vacation. They handed me the bill. The family group call started like most things in my life, obligatory and strategically vague. My parents had perfected the art of faux enthusiasm, which meant that every group chat began with way too many exclamation points and ended with me squinting at my finances. I was sitting in my San Jose apartment, legs curled under me on the couch, cradling my third cup of coffee when the screen lit up with my mother's beaming face. "Camille, darling, we have such exciting news," Carol practically sang, her lipstick flawless even at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Behind her, I could see the usual living room back in Seattle. The same old floral curtains, the crystal figurines in the china cabinet, the illusion of stability. My father, Dennis, hovered just at the edge of the frame, offering a tight-lipped smile before retreating behind his newspaper. Brandon slouched comfortably on their couch, grinning like a golden retriever. "We're going to Maui," my mom announced. "All of us," I raised an eyebrow. "All of us?" "Yes," she said brightly, as if she didn't hear the skepticism in my voice. Brandon could really use the break. You know how hard it's been since his situation. Brandon had been between jobs for 8 months. Meanwhile, I was juggling 3 IT infrastructure projects and 2 late-stage audits for a Fortune 100 company. But sure, he needed the break. "And what about me?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "My ticket?" There was a pause. A subtle static filled the space that followed. Brandon looked at the ceiling. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. "Well," my mother said slowly, "you're doing so well, sweetheart. We just thought maybe you'd want to handle your part independently. You know? So you can pick your flight times and hotel preferences." My part? I stared at the screen, trying to calculate how long it would take me to say something I wouldn't regret. "Uh-huh," I said instead. "And Brandon?" "Oh, we're covering him," she said breezily. "He's been through a lot." Of course. The rest of the call blurred into hollow chatter. I watched their mouths move, offering up itineraries and luau plans, while my mind screamed through the numbers, flights, hotel rooms, car rentals. I saw it all laid out like a spreadsheet from hell. And I remembered last Christmas, standing alone in that freezing Airbnb kitchen in Lake Tahoe, cooking a holiday dinner I paid for, while Brandon napped and our parents claimed the heating was too high maintenance. This was no different, just a more expensive location. After they hung up, I stared at my phone for a full minute, still on the home screen of my banking app. My credit card balance was up again. Another slow bleed I couldn't quite stop. I scrolled through the charges with a detached kind of curiosity, like I was looking at someone else's choices. But every purchase was mine. Every cent accounted for. I threw the phone aside and paced the living room, past the desk stacked with audit reports, past the door to the balcony that hadn't been opened in weeks. I needed perspective. Sanity. A sounding board. So I called Naomi. She answered on the third ring, already chewing on something. "Tell me you're not working on a Saturday." "I'm not," I said flatly. I'm calling about Maui. Your family trip? Yeah. Or more accurately, the one I'm apparently paying for. There was a pause on the other end, then the clatter of dishes. They asked you to pay again? Not asked, I said. More like assumed. Brandon gets the full sponsor package. I get a booking link and a smile. Naomi cursed under her breath. I think I've been funding my own disrespect, I said quietly. She didn't respond right away. She didn't have to. I sank into the couch and rubbed my eyes. The numbers in my head weren't abstract anymore. They were habits, patterns. My parents didn't see me. They saw a funding source. They saw someone who always said yes. My phone buzzed again. New email. Bank of Pacifica. Reservation confirmation. Grand Wailea Resort, Maui, Hawaii. My blood turned to ice. I clicked the email open, heart pounding. Total amount charged, $15,472. Name on card, Camille D. Harper. Status, confirmed. I blinked at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. I hadn't booked anything. I hadn't authorized this. But my card had. Without me. I told them I wouldn't pay. That's when things started breaking. Sunday morning found me back at my desk, the screen of my laptop casting a cold glow over last night's unopened wine glass. I hadn't slept much. The $15,472 charge still felt like a fever dream, except the numbers were very real, and the statement sat quietly in my inbox like a loaded gun. I clicked into my bank portal, fingers trembling slightly. More charges had posted overnight. 2 first-class round-trip flights, multiple hotel suites, some VIP luau experience at $749 per head. It wasn't just one reservation. It was the entire fantasy vacation, and my card was footing the bill. I reached for my phone and called Naomi. Already at the library, she said as she picked up. Get dressed and meet me. Bring everything. I didn't ask what everything meant. 25 minutes later, I was seated across from her at a quiet back corner table surrounded by financial literacy brochures and government grant flyers. She was already setting up a shared spreadsheet. Start with the last 2 months of your card statements, she said, typing quickly. Then request the audio logs from your call with the bank. You did call, right? I checked my statement, I said, but I haven't officially disputed anything yet. I needed to be sure. You're sure now, she replied, without looking up. While I pulled documents, she flagged suspicious vendor names, especially ones I'd never used before. Wailea Premier Concierge? She muttered. That doesn't sound like an economy flight in a shared room. I gave a hollow laugh. That's when Brandon's message came in. Brandon, they said you agreed to help, didn't you? Help? I stared at the screen. The phrasing was too familiar. It echoed back to junior year of high school, when our parents couldn't afford a second car and I used my part-time job savings to buy Brandon a beat-up Honda Civic. Everyone called me generous. No one called it what it was. A default expectation. I typed back, I agreed to pay my share. Not yours. Not theirs. Not for ocean views and champagne toasts. No response. Naomi handed me a yellow legal pad. Start writing down everything you remember about the phone call and save that message from Brandon. Why? Because it's starting to look like misrepresentation. If they booked using your card under false pretenses, that's grounds for dispute. But we'll need more than vibes to prove it. I wrote down the tone of my mother's voice, the vague wording. Just send your card so we can reserve everything together. And how I hesitated, and how she steamrolled that hesitation. I also downloaded the bank's call center app and enabled automatic recording, just in case. That night, I filed the official fraud complaint. It was surreal, filling out a form that categorized my parents as unauthorized users. But as Naomi reminded me, if this were anyone else, you wouldn't hesitate. Blood doesn't get to break laws. Monday morning, I woke up to a voicemail from my mother. You're embarrassing us, she hissed. You've always been dramatic, Camille. You act like we're criminals for planning a vacation. We're family. I sat up slowly, pressed replay, then again. My pulse didn't even spike this time. When the message ended, I stood at the kitchen counter, picked up my phone, and called her back. She answered on the first ring. "You've gone too far," she snapped. "This is humiliating. Your father can't even show his face at church?" "No," I said calmly. "I've just never said no out loud before. That's the difference." A silence stretched between us, as jagged and taut as a snapped violin string. Then she hung up. Back at the office, I forwarded the audio file to Naomi. The subject line read, "She said it. You heard it." That evening, we met again at the library. Naomi sipped her tea and eyed the growing folder of documents. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "But if this escalates..." "It already has." She leaned back, thoughtful. "Then we might need more backup. I know someone at Stanford Law. She owes me a favor." I looked up from the spreadsheet, heart pounding. For the first time, I didn't apologize for being ungrateful. I didn't say I felt bad or guilty. I just asked the question that had begun to gnaw at me from the inside out. What else don't I know? I thought setting boundaries meant peace. Turns out, it meant war. The hallway outside my apartment was dark when I stepped out of the elevator, the air heavy with the stillness that only late June nights in San Jose carried. I walked slowly, grocery bag in one hand, keys in the other. The lock always clicked twice. It had become muscle memory, but tonight my door was ajar. I froze. No wind, no sign of forced entry. Just an eerie, open stillness. My heart pounded in my ears. I nudged the door wider with my foot and stepped inside. The living room light was off, but moonlight bled in from the window, enough for me to see it. The box of financial documents I kept under the console table. Upended. Bank letters, printouts, highlighted statements, even sticky notes lay scattered across the floor like a silent confession. The drawer that held my passport was slightly open. My laptop was still there, untouched. But it felt like something else had been taken. Something intangible. My control. I backed out quickly and called the police. It took them 12 minutes to arrive. 12 minutes where I stood in the hallway with my heart in my throat, watching my own door like it might breathe. When Officers Lee and Carter arrived, they moved with a practiced calm. They swept the apartment, asked routine questions, jotted notes. Then Officer Lee looked at me with a measured tone. "Your neighbor Sophie said your father was seen entering earlier this evening." I turned sharply. "What?" "She said he told her he was just checking on you," Officer Carter added. "Sophie, from 3B. We shared coffee a few times. I hadn't even realized she was home." "I didn't give him a key," I said, voice tight. "Do you know if he ever had access?" Lee asked. "Years ago, not now." They filed a report, gave me a case number, and promised a follow-up, but there was no arrest. Not yet. "No signs of forced entry," they said. "Family dispute," they said. I stood in my own apartment, violated, and it still wasn't enough. The next morning, Sophie knocked on my door. "I recorded part of it," she said, holding up her phone. "He was yelling when I asked what he was doing. I didn't trust the way he brushed me off." She played the clip, my father's voice sharp and defensive. "It's not her business. She's not even answering our calls. You think she's too good for her own family now?" I closed my eyes. Later that week, Brandon texted. Just 5 words. "Can we talk?" "Just us." I hesitated, then replied, "Coffee? Noon. That place on Hamilton." He was already there when I arrived. Hoodie, dark circles under his eyes, fidgeting with his phone. When he saw me, he stood halfway, unsure. I sat across from him and said nothing. He exhaled. "I didn't know they'd actually go to your place." "You didn't stop them either." "I didn't think..." He stopped, stared at the table. "They told me they just needed a few documents, that you were being difficult." I pulled out the envelope, the statements, the fraudulent charges, the timeline. I laid it in front of him without a word. He flipped through them, one by one, slowly, his brows furrowed. These aren't yours? He asked, voice uneven. No, I said flatly. They told me. He stopped. They said the trust fund was already used up, that I got my share and you got yours years ago, but I never saw any proof. I leaned forward carefully. Neither did I. He looked up, and for the first time his loyalty wavered. You think they used it? He asked, almost to himself. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He rubbed his face with both hands. I swear, Camille, I didn't know it was this bad. Maybe you didn't want to. Silence hung between us, filled only by the low hum of the coffee grinder behind the counter. He reached for the last sheet in the folder, stared at the transaction list, then slowly set it down. I picked up my phone. New email from the bank. Your requested audio file is ready to download. I pressed play on the call recording, and my world shifted. The sound quality wasn't perfect. My mother's voice crackled slightly over the speaker, but there was no mistaking the words. Yes, I'm calling to confirm the Grand Wiley package under Camille Harper's name. Yes, that's the full card number. The code? It's 742, I froze. Naomi sat across from me on the couch, arms folded, her expression unreadable. My mother continued, her tone light and professional. Like this wasn't the 5th time she'd done it. You should already have the billing address on file. And yes, please include the oceanfront suite upgrade. Oh, and the luau tickets. Yes, all 4 guests. Click. The line went silent. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until Naomi reached over and tapped the phone screen to stop the playback. That's criminal impersonation, she said evenly. They didn't just steal from you. They pretended to be you to do it. Camille, you have them. The room suddenly felt too small, the lights too harsh. My mother's voice still echoed in my head, casual and precise, like she'd been rehearsing it for years. I opened the file directory where I had stored every document since that first bank alert. The folder was labeled Boundary Assets. At the time, I thought it was ironic. Now, it felt prophetic. Let's get it out of your apartment, Naomi said. All of it, before they decide to drop by again. By noon the next day, I was seated in a minimalist office across from Vanessa Liu, attorney at law. Dark wood shelves lined with hardbound legal references stood behind her like silent witnesses. She scanned the pages quickly. Statements, transaction histories, screenshots, and Sophie's audio recording. She didn't interrupt, just nodded, highlighted a line here or there, and slid the next page forward. Naomi sat beside me, quiet but alert. When Vanessa finally looked up, her gaze was razor sharp. This is more than a civil dispute. We're looking at fraud, identity theft, and potentially trust fund misappropriation. I shifted in my seat. Can we prove all of it? She tapped the voice recording on the last page of the packet. We can prove enough. More importantly, we'll let them bury themselves further while we move. Quietly. She reached into a side drawer and slid a document toward me. This is the limited power of attorney. You sign this, and I handle all correspondence moving forward. You don't respond to texts, calls, emails, nothing. Understood? I signed. Vanessa stood, crossed to her desktop, and pulled up an internal database. There's one more thing I want to check. She clicked through screens while Naomi leaned forward. What are you looking for? Trust account records. Sometimes these things leave shadows. After a moment, Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Here. She turned the screen toward us. Dennis Harper, your father, filed for a commercial loan in 2018. He listed a custodial trust account in your name as partial collateral. I felt like the floor cracked under me. My trust account? I asked. Vanessa nodded. Created in 2001, by your grandfather, from what I can trace. But I never even saw a statement. Of course not, because it was never disclosed. Naomi let out a slow breath. So it wasn't just the vacation. Vanessa's voice was colder now. Camille, this is a pattern. A multi-year scheme to siphon money under your name while isolating you financially. This case is bigger than you think. My phone buzzed on the table. Brandon. I hesitated, then opened the message. Camille, I just found something. You need to see it. They wanted to break me with a vacation. Instead, they opened the vault. The document Brandon slid across the coffee shop table was creased, hastily folded, and scanned from his father's file cabinet. Without permission, I assumed. But what it revealed was crystal clear. Commercial application, he said quietly. Dated April 2018. They borrowed against a custodial trust account. In your name. I stared at the page. There it was. Trustee, Dennis Harper. Beneficiary, Camille Harper. Collateral amount, $120,000. I let the number settle. You didn't know? Brandon asked, though his voice already carried the answer. No, I said. They never told me it existed. Not once. He leaned back, visibly shaken. I thought they were just pushing boundaries with the vacation. You didn't think they'd use my name to secure a loan. I finished for him. He nodded. I called Vanessa from the parking lot. Her voice was as calm as ever. Bring it to my office. We're going deeper. 2 hours later, we were seated across from a middle-aged man with gray temples and a nameplate that read, Paul Hensley, Client Services, Fremont Trust Co. He adjusted his glasses, clicking through records with a frown. Custodial account opened in 2001. Principal gift from one Raymond Harper, your grandfather. Funded with $120,000, currently holding $96,400. Wait, currently? I asked. He nodded. There have been 2 withdrawals, one for $25,000 in August 2020, and another service fee related to a loan process in 2018, now closed. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Who authorized the withdrawal in 2020? Paul checked the signature. Carol Harper. Power of attorney on file, though outdated. We now require biometric confirmation for changes. And where did the money go? I asked. He clicked again. Transferred to a checking account ending in 6387. Different name. Brandon Harper. Brandon's eyes widened. What? I never... He stopped. They said it was a gift, a surprise tuition top-up. I thought it was from their savings. Vanessa's pen scratched the paper rapidly. She used your identity to secure a loan, then drained the trust to cover her own narrative. But why not just ask me? I said, the words bitter on my tongue. Because if they asked, Vanessa replied, you could say no. This way, you were just the name, the number, the silent benefactor of everyone's lies. We left the trust office in a strange, charged silence. Outside, the July heat hung over the city like wet wool. Brandon walked beside me, quiet, hands stuffed in his pockets. At City Hall, we pulled Dennis's loan documents from the public records request Vanessa had submitted last week. The application history lined up. Loan approved in 2018, defaulted briefly in 2019, then refinanced, again, using what looked like a forged income affidavit from me. Brandon let out a low whistle. They really thought this would stay buried. Vanessa flipped the final page. And now, Camille, you have enough to move forward. She looked at me, firm. You have grounds for civil fraud, misuse of trust, unauthorized access to financial assets, and if we press criminal charges, identity theft, document falsification. I stared at the packet in her hands, no longer just papers. They were pieces of a life. My life, rewritten without my consent, manipulated under my name, while I was busy sending birthday checks and answering their calls. What happens next? Brandon asked, voice low. We prepare the complaint, Vanessa replied, and file a restraining order. Brandon looked at me. I'll testify. Whatever you need. I nodded once. There was nothing left to say between us that hadn't already been proven by signatures, transfers, and quiet betrayals. Later that night, in my apartment, I laid the final page atop the dossier. The trust fund, the loan, the recording, the withdrawals. The story was complete. I looked at Vanessa and allowed the first real smile in weeks. Then let's give them what they gave me. A surprise. They came for an apology. I handed them a summons. The sound of the printer echoed through Vanessa's office as the subpoena slid out. 2 copies, crisp and final. Vanessa picked them up, reviewed the addresses, and handed one to her clerk without a word. I didn't need to ask what came next. After weeks of silence, this was the response. "They'll receive it by morning," Vanessa said, her tone cool but resolute. "And they won't be able to pretend they didn't know anymore." I nodded, hands clasped in my lap. No shaking, no hesitation, just breath and stillness. By noon the next day, I received a text from the building manager. "Your parents came by. I showed them the TRO notice. They left quickly. Didn't say a word. The temporary restraining order was working, just as Vanessa had filed it. They could no longer show up, barge in, or hide behind half-truths. If they wanted to speak to me, they'd need counsel. And this time, I wouldn't be footing the bill." Later that evening, I opened my inbox and saw it. Family thread. Brandon Harper, sent to all. I've learned things I can't unsee. Camille was right. I believed what I was told because it was easy, because I didn't want to believe our parents would lie. But they did. To her, to me, to all of us. She deserves more than silence. She deserves the truth and the peace to walk away from all of this. I support her fully. Brandon. No reply came from Carol. None from Dennis either. The thread went still. I closed it, exhaled, and poured a cup of tea. That weekend, I invited Naomi, Vanessa, Brandon, and Sophie to a quiet gathering at my place. Nothing extravagant, just finger food, soft jazz, and a bottle of sparkling wine. The kind of evening that didn't ask for forgiveness or fanfare, just presence. Sophie joined via video call, waving through her screen, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Tell me when they cry in court." She laughed, toasting from her living room. Naomi smirked. "We don't do drama anymore, remember?" Vanessa, ever composed, raised her glass. "To boundaries, the expensive kind." The hearing took less than an hour. Judge Mendez reviewed the evidence without much commentary. Sophie's recording, the call logs, the withdrawal forms, the trust documentation. Each lined up seamlessly. "Ms. Harper is to be reinstated as sole beneficiary," the judge declared. "Mr. Dennis Harper is ordered to repay $25,000 within 60 days. All further contact shall be mediated through legal counsel." Carol's eyes never left the courtroom floor. Dennis didn't speak once. I didn't gloat. I didn't even glance their way. I just nodded and left with Vanessa beside me, the stamped court order tucked under her arm. Back at home, I opened my laptop. A new message waited in my inbox. From Fremont Trust Company. Subject: Account update confirmation. "Dear Ms. Camille Harper, we confirm your status as sole beneficiary has been reinstated. You now have full access and administrative rights to trust account number 9714. I leaned back in my chair, the email glowing gently in the dim room. It wasn't the money. It was the name. Mine, returned without condition. No longer a tool or an afterthought. A name I finally got to own. That night, I walked to the window, stared out over San Jose's twinkling skyline, and let myself feel it. Not victory, exactly, but completion. They said walking away meant defeat, but maybe it meant I finally arrived. The courtroom may have fallen silent, but the echoes of Camille's stand reverberated far beyond its walls. What began as a stolen vacation unraveled into years of deceit, all hidden beneath the guise of family loyalty. Justice, once buried under forged signatures and quiet compliance, rose with the weight of truth and landed without apology. When injustice is met with quiet courage, even the most calculated betrayal begins to crack. And sometimes the boldest revenge is walking away with your name intact.